our learning target for today. So I can analyze the role of free speech in different events through comparison and contrast. We're going to be looking at some different events, one of them pretty current, which happened earlier this year, and then some more historical events. And we're going to be talking about the different roles that free speech played in each of these. And to get us started, to just kind of get us in the right mindset and to kind of refresh what you did last night for homework, I want you to get out a piece of paper and just write really quickly on this topic. We'll just do a quick write, don't worry about spelling or grammar. But I want you to write some thoughts on this. Is it ever okay to restrict speech? So are there ever instances where it's going to be okay for the government or another entity to restrict a person or a group's speech? So just take a minute and write on that. Take about 10 more seconds kind of finish up the thought that you're on. Okay. I'm going to have you hold onto this paper. You're going to take notes throughout the lesson, and you're actually going to turn this in at the end, so just keep adding to it as we go. We're going to move forward a little bit. So I want you to think back to the homework that you did last night. You looked at some of these terms, looked up some examples, and we're going to kind of go over some of them now together. So does anybody have any thoughts? When we talk about free speech, what are we talking about? Or maybe what are some concepts related to that?
You're able to say what you want to say without being censored.
Okay. I like that, without being censored, without censorship. That's pretty important, right? Any other thoughts?
Ability to speak freely your mind without any fear.
Okay, so no interference. And I like to speak freely. That's great. Okay, when we talk about free speech, what amendment are we talking about?
First Amendment.
Yeah, the First Amendment, right? Pretty important one. Can anybody think of an example of free speech? How it works in our everyday lives?
I was thinking too, being able to state an opinion.
Yeah.
As like a religion, because other countries don't allow that necessarily.
Yeah, it's much more restricted in other places than it is here. Can anybody think of an example? So that's a great one, being able to maybe like go to Facebook or go to a blog and say, hey, I disagree with this. That's a really good example. Any other ones?
Maybe religious speech?
Yeah. Okay, and we're going to flip it a little bit now. This one is harder, and this definition is certainly not set by any means, but what about hate speech? What would that be? Zach?
I don't know, speech meant to incite violence on others.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Kind of like infringing on the rights of other people,
Okay.
like their ability to feel safe and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's really important, this ability to feel safe, or even just to be safe. Okay. And what about a hate group?
KKK.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest example. So let's go through some of these. Ellen, would you read this top definition for me?
Free speech from the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, right to express yourself through speech and other means with fear of censorship or government retaliation.
So that should be without fear, right? We don't want to fear censorship or government retaliation. And this is important. What's not free speech? Can I walk in here and say anything I want and just go, oh, nope, freedom of speech? Corey?
Hate speech.
So hate speech, yeah, is not always protected. We're going to kind of dive into that over the next couple of days because we're going to see in a lot of cases it may actually be protected. One of the most common examples of speech that's not protected is walking, this is the phrase they use, you can't walk into a crowded theater and yell fire, right? That you cannot use speech to incite violence or harm to others. There's certain speech in school that's not protected. But there are some great examples of free speech in school. So students during the Vietnam War wore black armbands to school in protest, and the school board said, nope, can't do that, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually said, yeah, they can, that this is protected speech. There's some symbolic speech that's protected. Actually, a lot of symbolic speech is protected. Does anybody know this case?
Burning the grave.
Yeah, that symbolic speech, which again has gone to the Supreme Court, is protected speech. So we're going to talk a lot about the differences between speech and what you can and cannot do. So this is a tricky definition, and it's a little bit different depending on where you are. Different states have different hate speech statutes, but this is a pretty commonly used definition. So speech that attacks, threatens, or insults a person or group on the basis of national origin, ethnicity, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. And this is something that we've seen very recently in our own communities. Is anybody familiar with what's going on Western Washington University's campus? Shannon, I see you nodding. Do you know what's happening?
I didn't get the whole details, but there was racial students, I don't know how many students wrote something on black professors. I don't know if it's to do with black professors or students of color wrote some nasty comments on somewhere in the school.
Yeah, so there were some threats posted specifically about students of color to Yik Yak, which is an anonymous site, but also to the school website. And that student was recently found and arrested under Washington's hate speech statute, which seeks to prevent these things. So it's something that we're seeing in the news right now. We're seeing it on campuses across the country. Okay, and then a hate group, very, very closely tied to hate speech. So these are groups that, groups of people that come together. A lot of times they use hate speech to kind of further their agenda, but they attack an entire class of people, so usually a group of people, and then this is really important for their immutable characteristics, for stuff that is not necessarily under their control, right? So there's these groups, and I think a lot of times we think of these as groups that are kind of in the past, right? Like we think of the KKK, but we don't necessarily think of them as a group that's still around. But unfortunately, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, this is still a very big problem. So the Southern Poverty Law Center runs this, it's called a hate map. We might get a chance to look at it a little bit later, where they actually map out where these groups are in the United States. But these are some numbers that are really just kind of surprising, and you can see that there are still 72 KKK groups active as of 2014. So this is something that we are definitely still dealing with, and it's speech that we're going to keep seeing over and over. Okay? So we are going to take a few minutes and we're going to listen to this news story. This is going to be our first kind of speech event that we're going to look at as we begin to compare and contrast. So this happened a little bit earlier this year. I think it was in April or May. And on that sheet that you've been taking notes on, as you listen, I want you to add some notes from this event. Is everybody ready?
We are still trying to learn more about a deadly shooting in Texas last night. What we know is that there was an event, a contest near Dallas, where people were drawing the Prophet Muhammad. Outside, 2 men opened fire. Those 2 men were shot and killed by police. Let's keep in mind what we still don't know. The authorities have not publicly identified the gunman or suggested what their motive might have been. From Dallas, NPR Kuwait Government reports.
The event was a contest for cartoons and caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, organized by a New York-based group called the American Freedom Defense Initiative. The organization has been designated a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The event in the Dallas suburb of Garland offered a $10,000 top prize for the best cartoon or caricature of the Prophet, and featured a speech by the Dutch politician Geert Wilders, famous for his anti-Muslim rhetoric. Organizers had hired 40 off-duty police and security officers, including some members of the local SWAT team, in anticipation of the possibility of trouble. The evening, billed as a free speech promotion, was nearing its end when two men drove up to the building and opened fire, wounding a security guard in the leg. The assailants were engaged immediately by law enforcement in a gunfight and shot dead in the parking lot. A webcast of the event showed a man dressed in military fatigues taking the stage afterwards to address the assembly.
We are going to move y'all into the auditorium here in just a minute. I just need everybody to remain calm, become orderly. We're going to take you into the auditorium a little further away from the front of this building, all right? I have no idea right now.
Pamela Geller, the leader of the American Freedom Defense Initiative, which also goes by the name Stop Islamization of America, said afterwards that the shooting demonstrated how much her event was needed. This is a war, Geller wrote on her website. This is a war on free speech. What are we going to do? Are we going to surrender to these monsters? The war is here. Wade Goodwin, NPR News, Dallas.
Okay. Any questions about that story? Any kind of immediate reactions? Yeah.
Well, it is kind of an interesting quandary because they're doing something that is hateful toward a group, but do they have the right to do it?
Right.
Because they're not saying they're going to cause violence, but they're doing something that's deeply offensive. So.
And what was that deeply offensive thing that they were doing?
Well, they're not supposed to draw caricatures of Muhammad. So.
And not just caricatures. Not supposed to draw any sort of image of Muhammad. So the idea that it would be a cartoon or something kind of silly or a caricature is particularly offensive, right? Any other reactions?
Yeah, this was like you said that it's something that's not in the control of the group. So the group that attacked or the group that's against which this is targeted, they don't have control whether Muhammad can be drawn or not drawn.
Right.
So
Right.
it's there in the books and written years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this isn't new, right? Okay, Lori?
I guess it's kind of an interesting choice of like contest because there were, I think, cartoonists in Europe, right? More than one maybe who've been killed or in a lot of trouble for drawing Muhammad.
Yes, definitely. And you can tell the organizers of this particular event kind of anticipated trouble,
They
right?
wanted trouble.
And maybe they
I mean,
were.
I don't understand how that's not inciting violence. You're doing something, and you're hiring 40 police officers to protect you when you know you're inciting violence.
Right, so they were ready for it. But this was billed as a free speech event, that this was something we should be able to do, right? So, okay, I'm going to ask really quick, how many of you think this event in Texas should have been allowed to go forward? It was planned out, people knew about it, it should have been allowed to happen.
Morally or legally?
Sorry, I think it's disrespectful, but I don't think legally that they have the protections though.
Okay, we're not going to dive into that right now. I'm going to ask you guys to make a judgment. Should be allowed, shouldn't be allowed. So who thinks it should be allowed to go forward as planned, as was?
Morally or legally? Sorry.
Legally. Let's stick with legally. Okay? Who thinks that it should have been scrapped? This event should have never happened. Okay? Alright, so in the coming days we're going to divide up and we're going to dig more into this. We're going to look at another event that draws some similarities to this one, and we're going to have a class debate over how speech is used in these kinds of